Be Quiet Pure Loop 280, not so much. Artic Liquid Freezer II 280 for the win. The battle of non-glitzy, non-RGB liquid AIOs coming up. This didn't start out as a comparison video, but turned into one. I decided to build myself a new desktop and settled on the AMD 5900X processor paired to an MSI B550 Tomahawk motherboard. I already have an EVGA RTX 280 and decided to recycle that into the new machine. After a painful 10 days of researching if I wanted to go air or liquid cooled, I settled on a liquid top mount. I am using the Corsair 4000D case, so 280 up top is the limit. Since RGB is not for me, I narrowed it down to the Be Quiet Pure Loop 280 and the Artic Liquid Freezer II 280. Based on availability on Amazon and the fact that the Pure Loop was $10 cheaper, I decided on that route. I built the system and all was good and finished it late on a Friday night, and on a Saturday morning it was quiet in the house and I fired it up for some testing. After tinkering for about an hour, I started to notice this high-pitched whine and it was not pleasant. I hate loud computers and had spent hours finding ways to make my laptop fans quiet. After poking my head in and out of the case, I determined it was the pump for the Pure Loop AIO. The pump is inline on the tubing running from the cold plate to the radiator. It is not built into the cold plate as most traditional AIOs. It is very small, and when running, it spins that little impeller at 5,500 RPM. The pump is not a PWM pump. Be Quiet tells you to connect it to a SATA cable for constant 12-volt power. They even provide the adapter. If you go to Be Quiet's website, they have an FAQ section. One of the questions deals with the Pure Loop noise. My Pure Loop water cooling system produces a humming noise. What can I do? Since the pump must be operated constantly at 12 volts, it generates a high speed of 5,500 RPM due to a very small impeller. This can lead to the pump being perceived more audibly. It is not perceived. It's real, and it drove me nuts. I also spent time researching if I could connect the pump to a fan header and lower the speed. Since my research was on the internet, and you know what happens when you research on the internet, some said no problem and some said don't do it. So I decided to try what would happen. I connected it to a fan header and lowered the speed to 50%, and it was noticeably quieter. I used fan control and it would step down in 8% increments from 100% to 50%, and you can hear the change. Listen for yourself. It starts at 50% and I take it to 100% and then drop back down to 50% again. Since it is not a PWM pump, the RPM stopped displaying when I reduced the speed. However, the thermals did take a beating at the reduced noiseless 50% level. Later on that. I then decided to purchase the Artic Liquid Freezer II. It arrived and I installed it. Just don't make the really dumb mistake I did installing it. It was really a doozy. I listed that video in the comments. Watch it for a really good laugh. It was pretty good. Before I took the Pure Loop out of my machine, I ran some thermal testing. And then I ran some tests on the Artic Liquid Freezer II. I undervolted the chip using the AMD PBO curve optimizer. My values are -18 on the secondary cores and -5 on the Gold Star and primary cores. No overclocking, it's not my thing. I use the AMD offset mounting option. There are tons of YouTube videos about it. It is supposed to offer better thermals, and you can read all about it or watch other videos about it. Using Cinebench R23, you can see the results of my tests. PPT, TDC, and EDC are listed here, which resulted in 179 watts. The LF2 is 3.5 degrees cooler and achieved a Cinebench score of 22,267. The LF2 pump spins at less than half the speed of the Pure Loop pump at full power. After this test, I changed up the fan speeds and pump speeds on the units to compare them, but first some info on the liquid freezer fan curves. The Liquid Freezer II has a strange curve. If the PWM setting is 40% or higher, the pump runs 100%. So if you want to slow the pump down, you have to be under 40%. I ran some tests at lower speeds and will show the results next. I found this chart on Arctic's website and it is not super accurate, but I did the best I could to approximate speeds. The lowest speed I tried was 3%, which I think was approximately 1000 RPM. One of the most impressive results from the test is that the Liquid Freezer II runs cooler at lower power than the Pure Loop at 100% power. When I lowered the Pure Loop to 50% to cut down on the noise, it saw a 2.4 degree increase in thermals compared to 100% power, 78.9 versus 81.3 degrees. Running the Liquid Freezer II at 3%, which approximates to 50% RPMs based on the curve on the previous slide, was by far the worst performer at 83.3 degrees. However, this is an estimate based on the poor chart that Artic provides on their website. What I learned from this is that I liked what I saw when running the Liquid Freezer at approximately 1750 RPM, or 35% PWM. Thermals were only 0.7 degrees different than full speed. From this test, it is easy to see the Liquid Freezer II is the clear winner in noise and thermals. When the pump runs at 100% on the Liquid Freezer II, I can't hear it, so that is awesome. I ultimately decided to run the pump at a constant 35%, which I think is approximately 1750 RPM. Full speed is 2000 RPMs. I also went with a slightly lower PPT, TDC, and EDC settings. For the past 6 weeks I've been very happy. The fan noise from my machine is barely noticeable, and I have never seen a temp over 79 degrees. For most things I do, it runs about 45 degrees to 65 degrees. The heavy use on my machine is from DaVinci Resolve and Fortnite. Resolve will push temps into the 70s when rendering, and Fortnite runs about 65 degrees. I have Fortnite adjusted to maximize FPS. The machine idles in the mid-30s. I live in South Florida, so the AC is on most of the time. The ambient temp in my house is usually 76 degrees. One other thing to mention is the base configuration on the Liquid Freezer II is that all the fans and pump run together on one fan header, so you can't control them independently. If you want to run them independently, I will be doing a short video on that. I will add that below when it is done. Also, I ultimately settled on a flat fan curve for the radiator fans because there are some issues with the harmonics that get produced at certain speeds on the Liquid Freezer II, pushing air through the radiator. For me, 40% and 70% were the best. The Liquid Freezer II is quieter and cooler. It gets 2 thumbs up. The Pure Loop 280, back to Amazon. A company named Be Quiet should make quiet components. The fact that they had an FAQ about the noise the Pure Loop makes on their website is not good. If I had found that first, I would never have bought it. As I stated earlier, I like whisper quiet machines. There was also that big 3.5 degree thermal difference. Be Quiet does get a big thumbs up for their Silent Wing 3s. I have 4 of them as my case fans and I can only say good things about them. Really quiet, love them, much quieter than the 2 stock fans that Corsair provides with the 4000D. Buy the Liquid Freezer II. I like it, there's not much not to like.